Mayor, council members, thank you. We'll reconvene. We left off with the planning department. Is there any further questions or inquiries regarding the planning department before we move forward? None? We'll move forward. So your next department is Department 3200 of the General Fund.
We have that new door in the budget. Shane just broke by any chance?
It's coming out of his budget. Don't worry, it's all
Okay.
right.
We're taking the
All
door out of the, we're taking the door out of, we're taking the door out of maintenance over there.
For the
Taking
council
out- we're
packet, it's page 63.
We're taking out of the maintenance over there.
Okay.
So 3200 building inspections. This is there is an addition to this department. This is where your code enforcement officer request is within this this budget itself. For the most part, the majority, other than that, we are pretty much status quo. Building department revenue streams have been staying consistent. There are some that have actually dropped. So I have brought down the building department permits. As you can see, just looking at the trend and where we're at for the current year, it's going to be a little difficult for us to make that 150, so I have dropped it to 80. So other than that, we're status quo for the year. Is there any questions?
And that's just due to
Just permits
nothing to
being
get
pulled,
permits, no
construction, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, given the time frames of some of our projects, like the bigger ones like Amberwood, considering that the sewer system still has to be developed and installed and things of that nature, hopefully within their timeline towards the end of next fiscal, we'll be looking at tilting up. I don't know, but I don't want to be able to I can't put that in there because we're just not there yet.
Okay.
Okay? I mean, obviously they can speed up the process and get it done faster, but I'm not going to assess at this point. Any questions regarding the building department?
Who's the building inspector right now?
That is Robert Egan, I want to say his last name.
And is he full-time, a full-time
He is
employee?
full-time.
Okay.
Okay. We'll move on to 4100, Recreation Department. We're seeing a slight decrease in this department of 5%, not a majority overall. I mean, last year's budget of 18-19 was 344,000. We're looking at 330 this year. Just some slight decreases in professional services, but other than that, we are pretty much status quo overall. Is there any questions regarding this department? No. Seeing none, we'll go ahead and move forward. Department 4200, Senior Citizens. Again, pretty much status quo from the prior year. Does every council member understand what this department is? Does anybody need, considering we have 2 new council members, do you want to? You're good? Okay.
No, give him a rundown.
Oh, I'm sorry. I
about
said no. I was moving fast. Look at you. Mike, if you'd like to give a description of what this department is.
4200 count has more of the nutrition and the food side of the senior center.
So you're saying you have 250 clients?
That's revenue, $250.
Oh, okay.
That's typically the rental of the pancake breakfasts for at Lincoln Park. I mean,
The senior center.
Lions Club.
Yeah.
And all those other things are just internal service accounts that are just allocated.
Yeah,
to
the
this
bulk of it's
budget.
going to be internal services account. It's going to be a portion of Mr. Kirchner's salary, but for the majority, that's about it. So again, it's just for senior citizen nutrition. So the next department is 4300, Cultural Arts. There is a portion of Mike's salary, Mr. Kirchner's salary, and also Nicolette's, the art coordinator's salary. You do have an increase in revenue stream from 15,000 in the current budget to 28,000. We have seen an increase, and we're doing more services for the children. Mike, is that correct?
Yeah, the 4300 would be like our cultural arts. Mainly, it's the co-kid players. When you see the youth theater, and then we do music and dance classes, and then sometimes special. We call it the boot camp in the summer, and so we're getting a real big increase in kids' participation.
How much from Measure K funds the Art Center? How much of the TOT funds the Art Center?
I'm not sure the amount, but 20% goes from.
Looks like 43,000. Does that sound about right?
There's an amount that stays in the general fund.
It's the last page.
It's the last page, page 90. It's about 43,000. It helps pay for staffing and things of that nature.
So that doesn't reflect the 43?
No, it's part of the TOT. The TOT itself is in Department 0000, so there's no point in allocating it directly to the. It sets the whole. So, is there any other questions regarding cultural arts? Again, we have a whole nother fund for cultural arts. That's Fund 605, what we'll get into later. Senior nutrition. Mike, if you want to talk about this is our senior meals.
Yeah, you know what? I got it reversed. I'm sorry.
I know.
Yeah, 4,200 was the senior activities, any kind of the fun things we do, the crafts, the games, special events, Cinco de Mayo dance, New Year's Eve dance, anything like that nature. 4,500 is deals specifically with the lunch and the meals that come each day, Monday through Friday.
Again, a portion of Mike's salary is in here.
So it's negative, but there are grants that actually pay for that, right?
For
Grant.
this department, there is no grants at this time.
So it just runs
Mike
it a lot.
is applying for FM AAA, but at this time there is none. That's why you're not seeing it in the first line item. It's a zeroed out. A lot of it is paid for by donations, so through the seniors.
Yeah.
When you talk in regards to applying for grants, do you do that through the county, state, or federal?
Most of our grants are usually through state or just individual donations.
Okay.
Now, FM AAA we apply through our local area agency on aging, which that's a long trail, John. Councilmember Trio comes from the state to the AAA, but then the state gets money from federal too. So
Yeah, it actually is
that's a
federal.
long trail money.
Yeah, it's a federal component.
How much do you get in grants a year? About for the nutrition?
For nutrition, we will get anywhere from what the FM AAA with 12,000, and then we can usually get between $5,000 to $6,000 additional dollars through local organizations or different other grants that become available.
So you look at the actual for fiscal year 17-18, the first line item, senior nutrition revenues, FMAA. The last A is cut off, but that's what that amount would be, the FM AAA grant for that year.
Okay,
there
that's
any-
the revenue.
Okay, we'll go ahead and move on. Next department being Department 4700, Recreation Sports. Mike, if you can please give a prescription.
Sports, we typically do T-ball, any assistance we provide at the ball fields for other programs. I take funds for the spray park when we open up during the summer. Anything related to sports and activities comes from 4700.
Is there any other questions?
You know, I'm not sure this. No, I'd have to measure it for you. I did it years ago when we did the LED lighting. I know we did one at the time, but I could find out for you. Yeah.
Seeing no further questions, we'll move on to the next department. Department 5100, Public Works Engineering. As you're aware, we do have Gateway, which is a large consultant services budget at about 105,000. There is also some additional services that we utilize for that service. It's also a part of the basin maintenance that we have budgeted within this department, but the majority of it's going to be for consultant services. And again, that's Gateway. They're here Monday through Friday from 8 to 12.
8 to 12, and you said you have other consulting services outside of Gateway?
Well, if we need to do maybe some surveying and things of that nature, so it'll just fall into professional services. It's just more of the consultant isolating out the contract for Gateway.
I mean, have we considered getting our own engineer full-time instead of being contracted with Gateway?
It is part of the discussion we have every year as far as staffing levels and things of that nature. Getting a full-time engineer, I mean, I don't even want to guesstimate. It'd be around the same pay level as a department head or a director. So given that, I mean, you're talking close to, given 30%, 150 for an engineer. I mean, I don't know. I'm sorry, I'm guessing, but I haven't looked at the full assessment of what that value would be. But I would think with pension and everything else, it'd be over
Yeah.
and above what we're currently paying.
I mean, the complaints that I continue to get and hear is that, they talk to one, they don't see that person again for another, then they talk to a different person, and then that person, I hate to say it, or whatever, drops the ball, then this person doesn't know I mean, it just seems like we just can't get it together in that department, in that area. And if we want to streamline and be much more efficient, shouldn't we consider at least looking for someone that's here full time?
We can look at it. If you like that analysis, we can
The
attempt
city
to.
manager and I actually just met with a developer, and that was one of the things he said. Even about, engineers, they're even though there are only two, it's off-putting for that person to meet with different people in different weeks.
Mr.
So
Mayor,
that's a valid point.
I would, Ms. Guerra, I would echo your frustrations. I've received a lot of phone calls and concerns in regards to that area, but I understand the staffing and I understand where you guys are heading. But I would love for our staff to look into, like we spoke before, call to Fresno State, look at what they have as either an intern and see in regards to hiring someone or get an analysis on what it would cost us and what are the actual pros and cons in regards to getting our own engineer that has our own flavor of our community for being here for 8 hours. So it would be something that would be nice. But other than that, this is just informational, right, for right now?
Yeah.
Well, this is it. I mean, this is the
Yeah,
first
this is the
one.
budget
so
workshop.
this is
Thank
the
you
time
for
to do it.
proposing.
This is the time to ask.
Yeah, again, this is the budget workshop, depending on obviously what happens in the direction we get today, you'll have another additional budget
you directing
workshop
it?
with
Are
what we're proposing. So, I mean, if there's something you want to discuss
I mean, we're
further,
paying
I think we should
100 and-
discuss it.
Is council
I mean, look at
wanting
how
to
much
put
we're
that
paying.
forward?
I am. Just to see what the numbers are, what it would be to
Yeah.
our own in-house engineer.
Okay, maybe we can assess what that position looks like and what the job duties would be.
And also, I'd, want to consider how much more they would need to still, in order to handle the workload, one person versus a firm with some resources. I'm not saying it would completely diminish the consulting, so there may still be a need for consultant services or professional services to support the engineer position, of course. But we can do that analysis for you.
Yeah, there's money that, it's already built in. That's the good thing about it. It would just kind of be a cost shift, to a full-time position, maybe a little bit more. And it's always important to be mindful that we don't want conflict of interest either, because it's such a small community, in terms of the engineers that would be interviewed for that. Yeah.
Okay, we could look at that. Any other requests or something you'd like to discuss? Okay, we'll go ahead and move forward. Public Work Parks. This is with the department where we added additional maintenance level 1 employees. Again, just to reiterate what the city manager has discussed, we have currently 2 individuals on staff as temporary full-time. We are looking to add 3 positions, so looking to maybe bring some of those on and add an additional individual or FTE to this department. Just to kind of give you a full scope of how Public Works in itself works. So you have the Parks Department, that's your only general fund department itself that has individuals from Public Works, and you also have the streets component. The streets component itself, when you're allocating individuals, you really need to understand that when a position is added to the streets department, it needs to be working in streets, because the revenue streams that are utilized for the streets department are actually restricted. So what we go through each year is an assessment of the total hours worked on qualified streets labor hours, and do an allocation to figure out if we have it or not. And if we don't, for example, if we're budgeting 200 hours, but it works out that we're only doing 150, that 50 that is not qualified expenditures needs to be allocated back to the general fund. So when we go through this budget process, you're seeing a lot of shifting and moving. So when you're seeing us add the bodies directly to parks, the general fund itself, it's because these individuals need to be general fund funded, if that makes sense.
And this
That's a little
number includes the
confusing.
three additional.
This number does include
People for
the
Public
3.
Works
And
parks.
again, we're currently funding the 2 individuals now
As temporary.
as temporary.
Temporary
Temporary full-time.
So you're bringing those full-time?
Full-time, and then
Full-time.
one entry-level maintenance, one A worker.
Okay.
Gotcha.
Is there any questions for this department? Okay.
You don't count the LLMD as revenue? Just
No,
as
it's its
fund?
own isolated fund. It is a restricted revenue stream. It can only be utilized for those services. So.
Okay.
Moving
40
along.
minutes.
Good. Department 9900. This is the last department of the general fund. It is one component that we'll look at because, as previous discussions, our tax share agreement has now expired, and it's not currently being renewed for the fiscal year of 1920.
God.
As part of the budget process and prior discussions, we look to the future and strengthen
Yeah.
our pension program and offset some of those liabilities, like the 11 million that's currently presented in the financial reports. At this point, what I'd like to do is actually bring up a tool that we utilize to see what that looks like and how that affects the overall UAL if we do allocate a payment. So again, if you look at the last line item, 791,000, the transfer out 728,000. What does that mean actually in dollar
528.
figures for savings? I'm sorry, 528. Yeah. See if we can see it. I'm sorry, it's kind of.
Small.
Can you expand it? Yeah, it's pretty blurry.
So this is what happens to the 528.
Correct.
is
So
where it goes.
if we do an allocation to the UAL, again, the unfunded accrued liability,
Mhm.
what does it actually do to your overall amortization schedule, and what does it save you? So plug in that amount. So you can see it's restructuring your calculation overall. It takes your current amortization schedule, and what you recognize is a decrease in that payment in the coming years of an average around $40,000 to $50,000. But in the grand scheme of things, when you look at the overall savings, you're saving about $672,000 in interest by making that payment. So again, this is a working conversation we'd like to discuss with you. This is our workshop. What this means, there's no set policy overall that's making us forced to do this, but it is something that we'd like to look through the future. It's something we previously talked about. Again, what we're looking to do is stabilize the pension program, stabilize our personnel, and look to the future and not just short term.
So what do you need today? Just, it's okay to put some money in the 115? I'm not good with those percentages that you did at the beginning. I'm not bad with them either. I just haven't reviewed them.
Okay.
I'd like to review that.
Okay. I mean,
But would you like
at least direction
from
at the
council
minimum to
set up
say
a one? Are
we'd
we
like
good
to
with the
allocate
115?
that some type of dollar amount to
Yeah.
the UAL.
Yeah.
And just
Is
to kind of
council good
refresh,
with
you have two options. You have the 115 trust, but given where we're at currently and what we see in the future, in the short term, we need to start making payments instead of just doing the trust. I prefer to do both and start that process and that program. But at this point, we're looking to the UOL to just directly allocate it and have some cost savings.
I believe that's a strong statement for our future, for our stability. And I believe that the number, I'm with you, Mr. Mayor, I still want to analyze the numbers. But I think just the fact that you're bringing up some policies that state in regards to our future, 10 to 20 years, I think it's a strong statement that we are trying to be viable, and it's good.
Stabilize.
It's really good. Okay.
So are we good with setting up a 115, putting some monies towards the 115 if there
Yeah.
are budget monies to put
Absolutely.
as a
So you're looking to do
piggy bank for
so your
the
suggestion would be to do both?
obligations?
Establish you can establish a 115 and that actually allocate funds to it. It is free to
Okay,
establish.
what's the danger of just making payments? Remember, Davis made all those payments, and then they had bad economic times, and they owed the payments over again. So that's not necessarily the best way to do it. You're not
The worst thing that you can do is
authorizing that, are
so
you? You're not endorsing that.
again, going back to some of the training that I've had from GFOA, CMFO, the one thing they don't suggest you do is go out for a pension bond. That's the one thing they suggest you don't do. They actually suggest more of a commingle of doing both, because saving the interest overall. There is some risk because you do have a market fluctuation that could offset that. And what happens is cities thinking, well, I'm going to get rid of all of it. I'm going to pay it all off. Well, you turn around and market changes and you end up having another payment
Doesn't
still.
do it,
So
yeah.
that's the risk factor.
That's
But
foolish.
and the same say, if you think of it in this factor, if you didn't do it, you still have that plus the additional that just came in.
Yeah.
So I think that's where cities need to understand. Yes, you can pay this down and it does help, and you're going to save on the interest. But
It doesn't
if
reduce
you
your
yeah,
annual
paying
payment
it all
either.
off doesn't mean you're going to end up with nothing and a zero balance for the rest of your future. So that's the only thing that and that's where cities got in trouble and saying, okay, we paid it all off. Well, all
During
of a
the
sudden
good
it's
times.
back.
Yeah.
So that's really what happened. So it's not necessarily it's a bad thing. It's just cities thought that they weren't going to have to deal with it no more, and it really
Right.
didn't go away.
I just would add that at this point, I think we want to know if council has consensus to support earmarking money, and we can come back to you with a staff report as to the mechanisms or the combinations that make the most sense for the city and for you to consider that. But just to make sure that you want to earmark that money now
No.
in the budget.
I agree.
Yeah, no,
Okay.
that's a good idea. I mean,
And so council's aware too. It's not
Yeah.
as simple as
City has
throw
to
it.
pay anyway.
Yeah, it's not as simple as actually going to a line item and saying, okay, throw it at this. What I really do is I'll go through a full assessment of each one of the groups and say, okay, where's more bang for my buck?
Sure.
Where am I going to save on the interest? Because what you're doing is allocating it to a certain line item. So what's outstanding, what's the term of that, it all needs to be assessed. So again, I'll go back and do a full assessment of what that dollar amount looks like and how it impacts overall and where do we spread it around. Okay.
Yep.
Absolutely.
You got it.
Yeah.
All right.
Move
Thank you.
forward.
Stop selling it. All right, come forward.
That's it, man. Stop selling
The
it.
deal is
Stop,
made.
stop. That's it, man.
Don't talk yourself out.
Carry on, man.
All right, that concludes the general fund. Is there any further conversation on the general fund that you'd like to discuss before we move out of it?
No.
Nope. Okay. We move on to Measure S. Measure S, our sales tax measure, as you're all aware, we are looking at a gain as far as our revenue stream. Again, projected from Uni Services, our sales tax professional services. For the fiscal year of 18-19, we budgeted 1.6. For 19-20, we're budgeting 1.8. Again, you're going to have a supplement come out of this fund to the general fund. The supplement itself that you see is in right under the column says expenditures and transfers out 710 or 791 the 1.4 million. You can point that out. Yeah. I think it's too small. Right there. Thank you. Okay. So as far as the expenditures within this fund, you do have, I want to say it's 2.5 FTEs for police, and you do have some supplies and services and equipment that's being requested from the fire department, and training as well. Is there any questions regarding Measure S?
Where's the 200,000 for the new police station?
200,000 is actually coming out of the reserve itself, not out of current or future revenues. So it's coming out of the reserve. It's being encumbered from the reserve itself.
The reserve, the 20% reserve of the city, or the Measure S?
Measure
reserve?
S.
Okay, so that's not a currently budgeted item.
It is not a currently budgeted item. We will bring that back to you, to execute that. Obviously, it's already been approved, but it's more of a transfer into the project fund itself.
Where's the reserve balance on the Measure
We'll get
S?
into that. It's one of the last pages.
Okay.
Okay.
Is there any other questions regarding Measure S? Okay, we'll move forward. We'll now move into the ambulance fund. These are our enterprise funds. We'll go through them one by one. Again, the ambulance fund is a service that we provide to the community. It is an enterprise fund, therefore it is for profit. This is where you'll see the IGT program, which is we're estimating about 1.9. Again, that is a net effect. So we're looking around a gain of 1.5. So again, to kind of refresh what the IGT is, if you look at the expenditures as a whole, within this department, I mean, the ambulance professional services is $1.4 million on its own. You also do have fire operations, which is another 300,000. So again, you can see that we're utilizing this net revenue stream to what it's supposed to be proposed for as far as healthcare services. We do have a small increase in some of our other revenue streams. Is there any questions?
Where are you showing that you're allocating this to medical operations that are authorized?
It's not a direct. What it is the expenditures itself is how it's being allocated. It's not a true allocation like here you move it in here and there. It's a revenue that's being received in the same fund and be utilized in the same fund.
Is the entire IGT encumbered to a medical type of expense only, as we discussed earlier?
It's utilized for healthcare services. That's correct.
It can't be
which is
put in
the
general
ambulance
fund
service.
and used for
No.
a building.
It cannot be directly allocated to the general fund. That's correct.
Okay.
So and again, just to reiterate how the encumbrance that we're going to do for the police station, it's coming out of the reserves and unrestricted revenue streams, not the IGT revenue stream.
And those reserves came from people who actually paid their bills,
That's correct.
Or Medicare.
Medi-Cal, private insurances, cash payments, things of that nature. Any other funding sources coming from ambulance service,
Not the IGT.
not the IGT.
And of that 6.3 million, how much is IGT? The whole thing?
6.3.
Sorry, I'm looking up at revenues. Fiscal year 17-18.
Oh, sorry. 17, 18, I don't have that. It's a net effect. I don't have that total dollar. I can bring that back to you. Because if you look at the second line item, insurance, private, and Medi-Cal, you got to remember the payment comes out of there. It's a net effect between the two. So you have to actually compensate for all that.
So that's not a net, the 6.3 is not a net number. It's just a gross
No,
number.
that's a gross number that we receive the actual payment itself.
And the 2.1 is where you put it for the police station, the negative 2.1.
No, the 2.1 negative is actually the insurance. That's us sending a payment out. So we're receiving payments from insurance and Medi-Cal. It gets allocated to that line item. But since we actually have to do a transfer of the Medi-Cal payments out, it has to actually, per the program, come out of our revenues that we received in Medi-Cal. So we have to send that money back. And again, they match it with federal dollars and push it back to us.
You send it to the Department of Healthcare Services, and then they match it, and then they get some more federal money on top of that.
That's
And
correct.
send it back.
And they send it back.
Plus a handling fee of 20%.
So yeah, again, part of the program is you have to actually send them back the Medi-Cal revenues that you receive. That's why you see a negative amount instead of a positive, which we'd normally see on a revenue stream.
But then the IGT, you've got the 6 million. That represents the full amount,
That's
including
the
the
gross
state
check.
match and the federal match.
That's the gross check that's
Okay.
received.
Gotcha.
Mhm.
Get
So
it.
you're not going to see a net 2 on the income statement itself.
So the amount could be different every year then?
It
'Cause it's
fluctuates.
based on-
They do an assessment. It's based off
It's
trips.
payments.
What does it cost you to do it?
Exactly.
They do a full assessment each year.
Okay,
Okay, it's how much they paid you out,
right.
how many trip numbers. Yeah,
Exactly.
they got to. That's why they're doing a true up now because they got
Mhm.
to go back instead of doing an estimate. It's cleaner to do a full assessment. I'm not sure why they did an estimate this year. It's just that's the way they did it. Again, they're
Yeah.
always tweaking the program and changing it a little bit.
Just makes
Okay.
absolutely 0 sense.
I know.
I prefer they
Zero.
just pay us and would just pay us
Yeah,
a flat
just
amount and
pay
be done
us.
with it. But
Pay the right
obviously they
amount,
make
and you
us
don't
go
have to do
work
all
for
this
it.
Mhm.
Accounting for it.
And we have a consultant that we pay out of just to make sure that we manage this program appropriately.
Oh.
Because it does have a lot of, as you saw the documents that you executed today, there's a lot of legal documents that go behind
Sure.
it.
And they haven't audited it, and who knows?
From our
what's
understanding, they
going
don't
on out
audit it
there.
at all.
Yeah.
Because what they're really doing is paying you back for the services you already performed.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what they're really doing.
Because actually you did their
Yeah.
paperwork for them.
So,
It's an amazing
okay.
deal. Just send
We're
money.
good.
All right, moving forward.
For fraud.
Department, our fund 601, Pioneer Village. I think you're all aware of Pioneer Village. I mean, so there's not much to kind of give you a brief overview. Just kind of means of what they do overall as far as revenue streams. The revenue streams really generates from the rental of the Pioneer Village itself. They do get a transfer in of 15,000, which basically assists them to pay for Public Works doing their maintenance and upkeep there. So they actually get a transfer in for 15,000, but they actually got to pay the general fund back 30. So it's actually just assisting overall, not paying for the full services. Is there any questions regarding
So this isn't the reserve.
The
This
reserves
isn't
are going
how
to be
much
in
they have.
the reserves of all the funds are going to be in the back pages.
Okay.
Okay.
And the reserve itself is going to be as of the day I printed it. So
This is just income and expenses for
this is
fiscal
just the
year
income and statement.
17 through 20.
What's been your reserves in the past? What percentage have you used
For this fund,
for past and now this one?
this fund itself, they've been chewing at it little by little. I think they got a large dollar amount increment some years back, and they've been just eating at it little by little. I want to say it's in the 90s at this point, 90,000, I should say. Let's see. Right now, as the point that I printed the report is at 93,000. So they've been chewing into that increment for a while now. So again, they don't have a lot of professional services and things of that nature. They try to keep their budget low, but they are slowly, as you can see, you see a deficit here of 44,000. So it's just they're chewing into their reserve though. So
It's good to have that.
okay.
Yeah. I think that's why they make it an
Next fund, Enterprise Fund for Transit Services, 603. This is where you'll see the transit employees that we have when we're contracted to Fresno County Rail Transit Authority for the labor. They pay us a flat amount as our contract for the professional services that we provide for them, and then we pay for the parts and labor that they may incur, but we also bill that directly back to them for no charge. So it's just part of the agreement itself. So you're going to see overall, if you take the professional services that's billed are the parts, it's billed directly back to them, and the net difference between this is about 152,000 if you're looking at the overall net, but you also have a $200,000 transfer out that is going to be going to the general fund.
Okay, so that's not showing. There's 0 for transfer out. Is that because this is new?
It's brand new. It's a brand new department. There's no budget for this within the 18-19. This is us adopting the budget of what it looks like for next fiscal. It has not been determined what that transfer into the general as of this fiscal will be. It's more of it's a new program. We're assessing it and moving forward.
So these are ballpark numbers. We don't know exactly what the contract with FCRTA specifies.
It's based off work hours, so it depends on how much they actually perform.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, as far they weren't part of the budget process. They weren't even there, so there was no
But you're
assessment done at that
estimating
time.
based on actual numbers, though. This
I'm-
is the actual contract with FCRTA.
This is the
that you're
actual
basing this.
contract. This is the rate for that fiscal year.
And the city is projecting to pay to shoot 200,000 into the general fund,
That's correct.
which isn't restricted. It can be used for anything.
That's correct.
That's the beauty of having the FCRTA maintenance facility. Extra money. Good.
Okay. Move on to the next fund, garbage service. As you can see, this fund really doesn't have too much activity. It pays for the contract. It's more of an in and out. The actual revenue from this agreement, like the franchise fees, you'll see already in the general fund, directly allocated. So the net difference between the two is $1,155. So it's not meant to be a revenue stream within this department. The revenues are directly allocated. Okay. Moving on to the next and last enterprise fund, the Cultural Arts Fund, Fund 605. You do have a part-time individual, or I'm sorry, 50% of a full-time individual in this department. They try to estimate what their shows and things of that nature are going to be. Also, the rental of the property. So as you can see, they're pretty much going through all their revenues, and they have a net loss of $20,000. Is there any questions regarding this?
Does that
Program?
take into account the Measure K revenues?
It does. If you look at the last line item in your revenues, operating transfers in, the 43,000, that is the Measure K.
That's where that ties in.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, we still have a loss.
So it's actually operating at a loss then.
According to this budget, it is. We are looking to get some grants and things of that nature and trying to assist for this fund. So maybe you can speak to that a little bit, Mike.
The Arts Council has planned additional fundraisers and estimates that some new ones that they did, about 15,000. We are looking at be part of it to expand on that, and that's some sponsorships. And also, the Selma Arts Foundation has given between $20,000 and $25,000 each year, and so we just haven't got a confirmation for this next year. So I know there's some money set aside. So when Nicolette and I sat down as the art center coordinator, we didn't include that yet until we have a confirmation. But if that funds come in, that will really assist us also.
You're gonna change the names of the shows. That's why you got zeroed out for the different shows, because they were for that year.
The way this works with, when you see program revenue, that's the total number of revenue for all the shows next year. But for finance and for us to budget each show so that we're not just expending money without kind of monitoring and following it, we do, each show gets their own little line item with numbers, so we can say which show and how much we spent on each show instead of just combining it all together, which gets real confusing at the end of the year. So
It also helps the Arts Council determine, which shows are profitable. Although they're already
Yeah.
doing that analysis, it allows us to go back and look and see what shows are profitable and things of that nature if you want to bring one back, so they can have a full assessment. So they've gotten a lot better at really looking at their budgets, assessing what the budget is for a program itself, and helping work with these individuals to say, okay, we expect you to do this. Instead of just saying, let's do a show, we're expecting you to break even in addition to maybe a little bit more after that. So we're requesting that, and they've gotten a lot better
So
at
you're
that.
trying to run like an enterprise account,
It is an
breaks-
enterprise fund.
breaks even? in
That's
terms
correct.
of
The overall
losing?
objective for this fund, again, recreation as a whole doesn't make money as a whole. It's not a revenue generator.
Yeah.
So for this sense, you really just need them to kind of break even.
It's quality
If
of
they
life.
make some more money, it really just goes back into the program. We're not looking to take money out of this fund and transfer it into the general. It's more of keeping it going, keeping the kids active, keeping the
Okay.
program running itself, and keeping it tie into the community, because it does have a large tie into the community itself.
Yeah, that I see the rental revenue for the art center is down. It's a great place. I'm surprised the city doesn't rent it out more, but I know the city uses it a lot for events.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's a great venue for have an event for 200 people. Blossom Festival was great there.
if I could just say,
DJ Cox getting sworn in.
the mayor is correct. The rental of the art center isn't so much that we're getting less rentals.
Yeah,
It's
make
that
it more rentable.
we're not getting really less rentals. We're just expanding on the additional programming, more plays. So one's offsetting the other.
The more plays, the less rental.
Correct.
Gotcha.
If there's no further questions, we'll go ahead and move into internal services. So in your packet, page 81, the first one you'll see is Fund 700 insurance. This is kind of some of the conversation we had earlier, talking about the RMA and how that works, the general liabilities, workers' comps, and things of that nature. So you can see the budgeted amounts. These amounts are proposed numbers coming from the RMA. So just you understand how we make these allocations. For this fund, each fund's a little bit different, but for this fund itself, the allocation method that we use, our mechanism is we look at the salaries from the prior budget year, or in this case, it would be this budget year. And then we also look at the vehicle count and to make that assessment of how we're allocating these dollars across all funds. Because remember, there are some other funds that are special revenue funds that have individuals in, and then we can make these allocations. But for the most part, we need a mechanism to be able to spread these dollars around that makes sense across all these funds.
Where's health insurance?
Health insurance is directly allocated to the employees.
So how much does health insurance cost?
We
the
budget
city?
one individual about 18,250 for one individual.
So how much is the total for health
Million.
insurance?
It depends on
premium that the
employees.
city-
We pay as we go, so it depends on the employees and what that cost
So
factor
on
is.
average, how much does the city pay in health insurance premium for a year?
I'd have to look at the whole.
Because that's a big one.
It is a big one. That's correct.
That's a bigger line item than probably any of these, right?
So actual for what year? So for the prior year, we looked at about 1.4 million just in healthcare costs.
So health insurance is 1.4 million. And the workers' comp, that's gone up 24%. Just refresh my memory on that. That's a self-funded pool, so the city pays a prospective premium based on payroll times that composite rate divided by 100, right? And then it trues up because you don't know how many claims you're gonna have and how they're gonna settle for like 2 or 3 years, right? It's like a retro. does the city get money back very often for workers' comp, 3 or 4 years after they do the recalc? Yeah. Is that what's driving it up? And the city pays like a factor. It's not necessarily an experience modification that the state assigns. It's a factor that's internal to the RMA itself. And is that like 1.1? Is that a debit, or is it a even? Is it flat, or is it a credit? I know payroll's up. So when payroll goes up, comp goes up because it's based on payroll. But it's not up 24%. Payroll's not up 24%. So you're saying some of that's due to claims?
Hmm.
Okay. I don't want to sweat this. We don't have much time, but thank you for that.
Okay.
That's a big line item.
No further questions. We'll move on to our next fund, which is 701 Fleet Maintenance. This is where we have all our repairs and maintenance for our fleet department. We tried to break it up a little more. We have a new mechanic in this department. He did come on this fiscal, so kind of meeting the needs of how he assesses his budget and what he looks are, what he wants to forecast out, and how he can assess and do his job. So you can see a little bit of a change overall, and some decreases in services. We're doing a lot more in-house than we used to do. So that's the overall budget. Is there any questions regarding this department? The mechanism we use to spread this amount across is actually vehicle count. So
Are those leases on the PD cars, does the city own those as soon as the leases are up, or do they turn them back in?
no, they're ours.
Okay. And most of those are 3-year leases,
It's a 5-year. I'm correct.
5-year vehicle lease?
So it's really a lease
Amortized
purchase
over
but
5
yes.
years. The cost is amortized? Okay. So then the city doesn't owe anything at the end of the lease? There's no balloon?
No,
There's
there's
nothing?
no.
Okay.
Okay, moving on. Building and utilities. This is one department that I like to point out that we try to increase slightly, and due to the fact that we've heard council's needs as far as their concerns of what our assets look like, what our capital looks like, what do our buildings look like. So we've actually looked to this department to try and bulk it up to maybe put some fresh paint on something in the fire stations, maybe add some windows or something to make these buildings a little more energy efficient per se. So we're actually looking to this department to be able to create a better upkeep and maintenance program within our current facilities. Is there any questions regarding that?
Just a retro question, the Measure S, was there anything in for the new fire station allocated there for this year? Was there
No.
any money for that
For
allocated?
the next budget year?
Yeah,
No.
no, okay.
And the allocation method we utilize for this fund is janitorial hours and then building count as well.
This is the number of
Okay,
autos.
going on to the next one, general overhead. As you can see, there's not a lot in this department. It used to be bigger. As the years come by, I've kind of chopped that and directly allocated to where it needs to be. The method we utilize for this service is employee count. Is there any questions regarding this? Okay, seeing none, we'll go into our last department, 704, data processing. This is where you'll find the contract for DataPath, who is our IT services. They have one individual here full-time, Monday through Friday, and they also have remote techs to serve that's maintenance for our servers, and also supplies and things of that nature, software. Is there any questions? Okay. Moving on, that concludes our budget amounts. The next pages we'll go into, we've already talked really about the transfer form. We'll look at it again just one more time. But here, the next page is starting on page 87 of your budget packet. You'll look at other funds, reserves, and balances. These numbers are as of April 18, 2019. So I'll kind of give you a moment to kind of step through those. If you have a question about any of these funds or what they're utilized for, please let me know, and we'll have a conversation.
So that's the equipment replacement fund, which is currently being used for the street sweeper.
So The
Are we
equipment
going
industry.
to add a, pardon me?
No, you're good. I'm
Are we
sorry.
gonna add a building, a capital improvement fund for buildings as well?
So if we do a capital improvement fund, that fund itself will be more of the equipment replacement fund.
Mhm.
So if we want to
Contents.
allocate directly, for raw numbers, $50,000 each year to a fleet program of some sense or equipment replacement program per sense, that's where you'd allocate the money itself. Now, if you're going to do a capital improvement plan, you'd create a new fund, but it'd be similar to that one.
And then how would that be funded?
Same thing, a direct allocation from the general fund.
Would
'Cause
it be like
remember-
an internal fund, you would take a certain percentage and add it to the, just as a wear and tear, like we were talking about, things happen. Things get broken, the equipment replacement fund, that's what it was originally intended for, right?
Correct.
But now it's being used for the street sweeper, so we've got the vehicle for it, we just need to fund it.
Well, there is
Is that
some
right?
items. Yeah, we do. There is some dollars that are in there are unrestricted. For example, donations that get received, they come into this account and go right back out. The street sweeper is the bulk of it, though. There is some items that are in there that have been allocated directly in the past. So there is some funds in there that can be utilized for equipment. Not a bulk of it. It's really a lot more of the street sweeper, the allocation that we get for the trash service that we provide as part of our contract.
How much, like a 50,000, 100,000?
I think it's want to say 100,000 each year.
It keeps that cumulatively?
That's each year we get 100,000. We're only spending maybe 50 of it on the lease of the new one.
Okay, so then we
So
have a
it-
pretty
it
good
builds.
chunk for our equipment replacement at
Correct.
this point.
If I'm
Subject to
correct.
that 627 limit, is that correct?
Maybe it's 60,000. I'll have to look back at that number. But yeah, we get what the program itself and its intention was to pay for the lease, but addition to that, after so many years, have enough funds to be able to pay a down payment for a new one. Because if you know, these street sweepers cost about $500,000. They're not cheap. So it's really a funding mechanism, not just for our current street sweeper, but being able to finance and purchase another one in later years.
Hmm.
Is there any other questions?
I have a just curiosity question.
Sure.
Fund 494, Housing Fund. What is that fund used for?
494.
It says redevelopment fund. Oh.
That's the RDA. That's a
Okay.
component of the RDA. Or should I say formerly the RDA?
Successor agency.
Correct.
Yeah.
So that's what you're saying is in there now? These are balances, correct?
These are the balances as the date I printed the report.
So if you go down a few more, you see ambulance fund, now we're to the ambulance reserve.
Correct.
Instead of budgeted amount. So of that 4.6, how much is IGT and how much is Medicare?
That's the reserve itself. What actually that number consists of is what's a portion of leftover from the balance of the prior year budgets, our prior year income statements and gains. It's actually a little bit low due to the fact that we've already paid the IGT amount. If you remember from the prior council action, we did that transfer. So we're waiting for the payment to come back, so it'll actually increase when we get that amount back.
And how much of that will be IGT?
That amount that we're getting back, we haven't got the last dollar amount. I don't know what the return's going to be.
And how much of this current one is a intergovernmental transfer fund of the 4.6? Any?
No.
None of it?
No.
Okay. Because you transferred the whole thing. You transferred all of the IGT.
Well, the amount that's in the current fiscal year hasn't come to us yet.
Okay. You transferred the IGT for 16, 17. The true.
It's not a transfer. It's directly allocated into the fund itself. We don't transfer it out.
Mm-hmm.
So it's expensed in the fund itself.
So it's here, and when you pay something else with it, you expense it from the fund. You don't transfer it. You actually pay something with it.
We pay for the ambulance contract. That's correct. And the service they provide within that fund.
Because that's the only permitted, one of the permitted uses. you
That's
can
one of the
use.
permitted uses. That's correct.
Okay.
Is there any other fund that council has a question on? Again, most of these are grant funds, special revenue funds. A lot of them are restricted for special projects or street revenues, things of that nature. We've pretty much through the budget process gone through the other ones.
What's insurance? What's in there? The 225?
I'm
The
sorry?
insurance fund? 225,000?
Internal services, that's one of the ones, that's internal services. It's one of the ones we just went through.
Oh, internal services. Okay. So it's allocated to all of the.
Yeah, so your 700 series is
Departments.
going to be your internal services. That concludes my presentation. If council has any further questions, and it's open for discussion. Oh, I'm sorry, I missed the transfers. Just a quick recap, you can see that the actual, the Measure K itself, this is on your packet number, page 90. The 12%, how it's allocated 50%, and what that allocation looks like. We have already discussed the remaining 1.6 coming into the general fund. Again, Measure S and how that supplement comes into the general fund, what those dollar amount and how that breaks down. That's concludes it.
Okay, so where are you transferring from the ambulance fund, the 2.8 for the new police station?
Again, it comes out of the reserves of the ambulance fund itself. It's not coming out of future or current revenues.
Okay,
It's not a budgeted item. It's coming out of the reserve itself.
okay.
Yeah,
So does
2.8.
the ambulance fund have two separate accounts?
No, the amount you're looking at is what we call, it's called fund balance in an accounting method, which what it is similar to an equity. It's on your balance sheet. We're not looking at the income statements on that sheet itself. We're looking at the balance of the fund balance, so your equity within the fund itself. So it's revenue from the prior years that's been retained within
Okay.
the fund itself.
Okay.
So again, we're utilizing the fund balance. We're not using current or future revenue streams of IGT or anything else.
So we should talk about what we're gonna do in terms of policy and authorizing these additional flows, right? We're gonna talk about the economic incentives.
And if I might, just before we conclude the budget discussion, and we can come back to you on policies at a future meeting. So, but I think we had unanimous concurrence on going ahead and putting money towards the UAL and coming back to you with exactly the mechanisms, way to do that. We also had consensus from the council to look at do analysis on an engineer. Also, we had support for economic development as proposed in this current preliminary draft. And there was discussion about public safety in particular. We talked about the fire department, and it seemed like there was concurrence to go with the recommendation. At this point, this is, our first round. I just want to make sure I've captured the body's direction. And in regard to public safety for officers, for police officers, I just wanted to make sure that the two that were being proposed for patrol, do we have concurrence with that, or did you want to give us any other direction on that, or at this point are we on track with council's priorities?
Good with two,
I'm good with two more.
plus an admin assistant, right?
Plus,
your
yeah,
admin
plus that.
assistant.
Yeah,
Part-time.
yeah. Oh, no, that was full-time in
I
PD.
don't know, chief.
Okay,
Oh,
if
you
we
want
might do,
So at this point,
numbers will be
So-
after they do, the actual numbers will be.
okay,
We need a
thank you,
little
I'm
more
glad we're
information in regards
circling
to that.
back. So you'd like more information on fire?
Yes, in regards to what you guys were, what
Okay.
Councilmember Garrow was stating, we wanted more information.
Okay, more info on fire, and then with PD, if I could just make sure with the two and the full-time administrative assistant, that would alleviate, that would allow a sergeant to be more tactical.
So our next budget meeting, you'll bring back the fiscal impact of a new firefighter. Is that right? Okay.
Okay.
Authorizing additional
Well,
firefighter.
the firefighter, the fiscal impact would be about 91,000, I think. Yeah. So the budget impact would be about 91,000 for a new firefighter.
Is that a
step
burden
in.
number? So
Huh?
that's a total number.
That's a total number with benefits and salary.
The request I was having was in regards to the conversation that the
More
entire
of
council was having.
logistics.
You guys were talking, the logistics in regards to, if
Correct.
you have one, from what I'm understanding that, and this is just my opinion, I'm understanding that if we hire one, there's some ramifications in regards to us not hiring two, correct, Ms. Manager, Ms. Teresa?
So your question is more along logistics, staffing levels. How does
Yes.
that?
Yeah, how's it
How
gonna
does
affect
how
us
do
in
those
long
two
term?
employees
and-
requested overall? So I think we can work with chief
and
and
then
get
see
you
what
an
we
answer
have
back.
and where we can get to a point.
Correct. So it's not a dollar, it's more of a logistics question.
Yes, and I think what I was getting at is whenever you make a policy to increase a staffing level, you are now working at a new operating level of higher costs in order to keep that new policy level. So whenever you increase a policy level for minimum staffing, it is very difficult unless there's something really awful, which we hope doesn't happen, like a recession, to ever go back.
Well, so, you know, the PD's been operating below authorized levels for, shoot, as long as I've been on the council. So it's not like fire department couldn't do the same
So
if the
what-
council merely authorized one additional authorized
So-
firefighter. So it seems like the direction, it could go back and forth. If there's not enough funding, well, let's hope there is, but, you know, that fire personnel that was hired the last probably would go out and become reserve or whatever. But there would be an escape hatch for that. It wouldn't just be, you have to have this many firefighters and you can't go above that or below that ever. So it would just be authorizing additional firefighter and then hopefully getting up to the 2 next year if we can afford it. I you know, it seems like that's a rational way of doing it, going progressively rather than adding 2 on at one time because of my colleagues saying that, you know, who knows what could happen with the economy between now and the next year. We've got to be wise about that and those decisions. At the same time, you know, these forest fires, they're getting worse, you know, and we're getting fewer and fewer fire department staff on during the fire season, which is 12 months now.
So we'll definitely take a look. And then in regard to the officers, I just wanted to make sure we're good with the officers
Yeah,
as proposed.
I'm good with the 2 and the additional admin, full-time admin, correct? Okay. I mean, I'd like 4, but I'll take the 2.
I just want to clarify that the request I was having in regards to what we were talking about was for you to bring us back the analysis of what you just stated about bringing back 2 people rather, and just bring us that information just so we can have a clear thought as to when we make the decisions. I'm not shooting them down. I'm just saying I'd like for a little more information in regards to that.
Okay,
for the
in
fire
regard to the
department.
fire department, more analysis on the policy.
Great. And you'll bring that back at the next budget meeting, is that correct?
Yes, and if I could just, I've heard from one council member on the 2 police officers and the admin. Did I hear from
Yes,
everybody else?
yes.
Nodding
Yes,
head,
I did.
nodding
Yes.
head. Okay, thumbs up.
Great.
And-
Yeah, congratulations.
Anything else on budget?
That concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good job.
Thank you,
Finance
Isaac.
Director. Thank
Did
you
a
for that.
good job. Thanks,
Job done.
staff,
Yeah,
for
thank you,
answering all
Isaac.
those questions.
All the information together.
City Manager, compliments to you and your staff for this presentation.
Yes, definitely.
Absolutely.
Are we gonna talk about incentives? Do we have time?
Is he here?
They're going to be here. They were able to move to 2:30, so we
They're
can
able to
take a
move to
few minutes.
2:30. We got half an hour.
Okay.
So we
Yeah.
got some developers that are coming into town. I know I've had some feedback in terms of wanting the city to incentivize the construction and the remodel. And I've had some discussions with the city manager about it. And I'm hoping we can talk about what we can do as a city to incentivize that economic development, especially now we're looking to add somebody in the economic development area. Yeah, this is something I think is a long time overdue now that the city has more revenue. Let's take that revenue and make it larger.
Put that closer to Scott.
He can't hear you.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes. Okay,
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. If, I just wanted to put a few things together this part of the budget workshop. There was a request, thank you, Mr. Mayor, for explaining that there have been folks coming into the community wanting to do development and make investment into our community, and so council wanted to have a discussion on incentives, economic development incentives that we could take a look at to promote development, since that is one of council's top priorities. And I just put together a few slides that are really for you to consider. I want to hear from you what you're thinking. We want to hear from you what you're thinking in regard to this. Some things to think about when you're looking at economic development incentives. Do you want to try and, what are you specifically trying to encourage? Is it overall development? Is it job creation? Do you want to incentivize very large projects that create a lot of, living wage jobs? Or are you looking at a specific area like downtown? I really want to focus on downtown and how to revitalize downtown, and maybe you look at a geographic area that you would incentivize investment in. So those are some things to think about. One of the things I also would suggest is any incentives that we do, we look at how we are going to measure them. What is the goal? How do we measure it? And give you that kind of feedback. Some of the things to be aware of, we do have our location is an asset and an incentive. If we're a cost-effective place to live, work, and play, if we have available property for development. Other communities may not. So access to the freeway, access to major markets. There are things about our location that are attractive. I know that's typically people don't think of that as an incentive, but it is something that gets people to look at us and say, hey, let's look at Selma. And the fact that you are a pro-growth and business-friendly council is a huge message to the development community. So I just quickly wanted to go over that so you're already have a lot of great things going for us in the city of Selma, a council that is business friendly and pro-growth, and a community that has a lot of development assets to work with. So getting into, I think, what you really want to get to are things like services that we can provide or financial incentives that we can help development with, and those are the next two slides, but really I'll turn it over to you. But just be aware, like, having a streamlined process, you've talked about that in the budget, and I think that's huge. Time is money to developers. So wherever we can come up with streamlining and continuing to be more efficient in our processes, that is a definite benefit. We already do provide a no-cost project review, so that is a benefit. And then we have a lot of partners in economic development that will do workforce development recruitment. They'll do training. So whenever we have a business, we can look to different partners to bring in different incentives. When you go to financing, we can look to some of our partners for loans, grants. We can look to utilities. They may have incentives for large users of electricity, for example. They get a different rate. So we can look at the creation of districts. That being said, this is really an opportunity for us to hear from you. I just wanted to give you some slides to consider and things to consider.
Please, anybody.
Go ahead,
ahead.
Scott. You have it. Go ahead.
All right, I think, just to kick it off, I think we ought to make downtown an economic opportunity zone for remodel and infill, because that's where a lot of the housing bucks are coming from, the state these days, is housing, higher density housing. And if we could leverage that by incentivizing these developers, we have one in town right now that's working on 2nd Street. There would be a multiplier effect to that to make our 2nd Street look nice again. And to incentivize, ground floor commercial and 2nd story habitational. And I think to do that, we should designate that particular area as an OZ, our own opportunity zone. Even though the federal government didn't designate us as one, we'll do it. And what that would mean, I think the council would decide on the specifics, but maybe something along the lines of deferring rezone fees, permit fees, and property taxes. Not forgiving, not just saying don't have to pay, but deferring them until the contractor starts making some money and has a revenue stream from the properties that he or she is remodeling. As also part of that opportunity zone, what about a renovation fund and I'm just talking downtown, but it can be beyond that. It can be somewhere else. But I'm just thinking a renovation fund for our downtown streets, high, 1st, 2nd, 3rd, McCall, a certain amount of money that folks could draw on to paint their buildings, to make them look nice on the outside, to do landscaping. Now, that's not a payback. That would be something that they would get. I don't know if we want to make it a matching, but too late. And you just have to show, fun. You just have to show proof that you've done it.
Mhm.
and then you get reimbursed for it.
credit.
Make
You
it a
get credit.
reimbursement. Yeah, a credit.
Credit.
So I think it's important to have those incentive zones, and I think it's important to make our downtown look good. And I think those are a couple of incentives. Thank you.
I think perhaps instead of using our community block grants for just streets, perhaps we should use it for economic development and fund some of those projects that
Yeah.
the mayor just spoke of. I think if we do that, we have a funding source already. We're pretty much guaranteed to start those programs. I think also we should work with, as I mentioned earlier, our developers here in town who want development. I think even though it's kind of not commercial, but I think we need to bring like this Amberwood projects like that, quality neighborhoods. We need to get that fast track because I think that would be the catalyst to feed these other programs as well.
Oh, no, me? Okay. No, Franco, you're right. Amberwood Project's been on the horizon for a long time, and really, to jump, when I say jumpstart the community economic growth and in money stream, like we talked earlier in the group here, the Amberwood Project is a key element to get the community up and running as far as and improving our downtown area, our future plans for our city. Because really, once we get that up and going, you're looking at 1,200 homes, and not to mention GJ and Gardner Group. That's another housing development moving, and we're looking at in the next 5 years, we're looking at maybe over 2,000 people in population as far as in the school district. So we got to think outside the box here, guys, and as far as but we have to get these projects. Really, time is money to these developers. We all know this, and if we can get these guys up and running very fast and moving very quickly, we understand there's some criteria that we're meeting halfway, but I think by meeting them as earlier at the table, the PG&E, the water, all these guys at the table, meet them at the same time instead of different meetings. It's been more effective to all of us because it's time, it's money, because it's really it's all about to them developers, but at the same time, it's up to us when they start going. It's up to us as a cities to market these guys, that are going to invest our money. I don't care who's going to I don't care who comes into town. As far as like when Habit came in, the other businesses come in. We have to find a way to, hey man, this is what we have in City of Selma. And the chamber's doing a good job. I got to give them credit. The ribbon cuttings and everything, but it's up to the city to change the image that we have. Say, hey man, this is a good city to live in. And we are moving forward because we have a football stadium, and we have our facilities are going good now, and I think the time is right to move forward. And it is, and we're looking at our budget, looking at our money, how we're going to utilize our money, and how we focus. And we do need a planner in our department, a full-time planner. I get it, because back in the days when I came on board, we did have all the departments. And I know what it is to feel like not to have that department. I've experienced over the years as being a council. When I came on board, we had those departments, and when the economy crunched, it taught a lesson, to me. Okay, Avalos, you got to plan smart, for the next council, and that's why I'm here to this day, to let you guys know, hey, this is very important, that we should have in-house planning. It's very important for the city, of all cities, because back in the days when we had Archie, he did contracts with the planning department with other cities. Fowler and Kingsburg, he reached out, and we had revenue coming in, but he retired, and we didn't fill that position because we didn't want to lay any services off. So it's a challenge, but I believe that Amberwood Project is a key element to get the city going, and it'll fall in with the Tim Jones, the Cliff, all those guys coming to the city. Larry Raven as well, if he wishes to build. But what I'm saying, we got to get these guys up and going, and to me it's important. How we get them, how we get there. That's the key. But I think by sitting and talking to them, what they really want and what they need, and how we get there as a group. That's all I got to say.
I enjoy the fact of the economic zone, Samir. I'm with you on that 100%. I also would like to tell our council that in regards to our economic structures and our future development, we have funding sources that we've been thinking, and exactly what you stated in regards to thinking out of the box. We do have CDBG money that we have in regards of 240 to 260,000 that we're using at this time. We've been for the last 5 years using it for our offsite improvements of the streets and curbs and gutter, which is a pandied approach because we have already been told all the streets are needing. But what dividend has that paid us? What dividend, what rate of return has it given us?
Right.
We can use that 260 for your economic development budget. I'm just stating this. That's just thinking out of the box. And we could start stimulating our economy in regards to the infrastructure at our downtown. Our downtown. That's one. The other thing is in regards to all of us and knowing that we are budgeting an individual economic administrator and our planning director, we as a council can actually, we've all stated that Amberwood, Selma Crossing, Mr. Tillion's project, and the economic zone that you have, those are 4 items. We can actually put those 4 items on the table and instruct our planning director and our economic administrator to tackle those and teach them our vibe, what our community wants, and then start going out for somebody big. Let's take care of all the ones we have now and let's move on. Let's think about all the getting out of the box and looking at the CDBG money we have coming to us every year. Let's set aside some of that and let's start working on our economic development plan that you would propose. And that's money we get every year. We're not taking away from it. Our infrastructure problem is probably in the $30 million range. It's a lot of money. $280,000 or $240,000 is not going to solve that issue. If we start bringing it back and we start talking amongst ourselves, this is huge. I'm so happy today we're discussing this. So I'm for anything, and I really love the economic zone. It's a plus. Okay.
Sarah? Councilperson Guerra?
I have to say I agree as well. And this has been a great meeting because I think that you could tell just by all our answers, questions, we're all pro-growth, and we want to see our city grow, definitely. And it's time overdue. Time overdue. So I have to say with the businesses, developments that are coming, that we have now, those are the ones we want to take care of and we want to move them forward as soon as possible. I also agree with the renovation or beautification or downtown, incentivizing the building owners. Even I talked about a color scheme. I've talked to other building owners and doing a color scheme like Clovis, like, something where if we say, we have so much in a fund and if every building owner is willing to do it, we can all go maybe 3-4 color scheme. And we're going to say, okay, if you're in it, it's only going to be $1,200 a building owner because you're participating in this. I mean, I think every little bit is going to help our downtown. And it could also include landscaping. It could also include, I know one building owner asked me if we could help her with her parking lot, doing the tar. She needs it, but she said if someone would help her with half of it, she'd pay the other half. So I think people want to they want to make their buildings look nice, but they just kind of want a little bit of help. And I think that's what happens at other cities. Clovis does that. I'm pretty sure Kingsburg does it. So now that we're getting there, I think we should have a fund where we can incentivize the building owners so that we could be a Clovis, or we could be just as like Kingsburg, have our music downtown and have it really inviting because we're going to get there. I mean, we're getting there. But it's just, let's do it. Let's just not talk about it because we've been talking about it for years. Let's do it.
Yeah.
So that's my idea.
Does that give you enough direction? Okay, great. All right. And then did we circle back on the financial policies? We got 12 minutes. Did we decide on, I think we just decided on what the city manager said we decided on, but I don't think we really came up with any new policy decisions in terms of. I saw his, yeah, yeah, I saw those, proposals there. So you want us,
Is there any comments, preliminary comments, before we move forward on our, before I make a further presentation,
not,
I should say?
not at this point. I think, one thing that really caught me off guard this year was that ambulance fund. Having this super huge amount of money in this fund that we didn't really know about in a timely way. I'd like to have a mechanism to know about that ahead of time. When there's an additional amount in a fund, how do we ensure that the council knows about that and makes policy decisions or expenditure decisions accordingly?
I did a little research a while back, and I'm happy you were explaining it. I'm happy you were explaining some of it, and the only question I have and concern, and along the future growth of the ambulance fund, is the fact that actually the fire department has a big role to play on this. As they're getting the administrator, the more accountability we do and the better accountability we do, we're going to get more money. So the bigger strength is to actually allocate or talk in regards to this gentleman here, our chief, and get him the proper staffing or the mechanism to make sure he can account it better, because that's where our finances are going to grow.
Yeah,
in
so
in that finance. And
just to look to the future and trying to compensate for exactly what you're talking about, if that amount continues to grow, if you look at the fund, what we're actually allocating is captains, because again, captains are on the first responders. They're actually supervising the EMTs, the medical. We're only allocating about 3 individuals. We actually have 6 captains, so we can compensate that as that dollar amount continues to grow.
So you're
But
saying
yeah,
the ambulance fund would be a source of funding for the fire department? So you're saying there should be a policy for that, because about 1.5 million goes out to the general fund every year, and the rest just stays in there, and then we get this windfall where they paid they paid more than they usually do, and there's really no policy for that. There's really didn't really know it was there until there was this drastic need. So if we could know better in advance, we could plan better.
our
for those
staff is only
funds.
going to be as good as our policies. And our policies, which with your recommendation, with our budget, our policies will add here and add some teeth to what you got going on. And that's going to better us in the future. So we need to come back with your proposals and the city managers.
I can create a policy, something to the lines where we have a large spike within one of our revenue streams, a growth of X amount percentage of outside of our normal growth factors, or something to that extent. I can come up with something.
Same with
Okay.
the decrease.
Decrease
If
as
there's
well.
going to be a decrease, if pension liabilities are going up, we just need to know ahead of time so we can plan. So we don't have those last minute surprises.
Okay.
Just-
Anybody else have any
Anything else?
issues?
Just on closing thoughts, 2 things. One, as we look at the analysis of the things that you asked us to take into consideration, and keeping in mind that we're trying to be sustainable, we may be looking at where we would make those offsets within the proposed budget that you saw today. So just if we come back and say, if we add this, then we recommend taking this away or something like that. Just don't want you to be surprised by that. The other thing is, if we need to, the other part is, we should look at a date for our next meeting, a budget meeting. If you want to do that now, or
Sure.
if you have do we have a couple
7
more
minutes.
minutes? All right.
How much time do you need to get back to us?
Well, we're looking at potentially, so we don't have, we have the holiday in May, and we have a ICSC. So with that in mind, we were thinking of either the 28th or the 29th?
Of May. Of May?
Yes, so May. And do you want it to be?
Tuesday or Wednesday? Tuesday 28, Wednesday 29.
Is that right?
Tuesday at 9?
Tuesday the 28th,
Mhm.
or Wednesday the 29th, what
I
would
don't
be?
have anything. Okay. 28?
28th?
Do you
time?
want to
9
do the
o'clock.
same format, or do you want to do a different format?
Sounds good with me. I mean, I don't know if we'll have another 5.5 hour meeting, but you never know. If we start at 3, we don't want to go till 8:30. 9 good? 9's good with everybody? Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. That will ask for oral communications. Does anybody else have anything to say? If not, we will adjourn.